Hi, everybody. Welcome back. And beeping noises. And I apologize if anything is weird today. I had a little bit of a need to reboot the computer last minute, so I haven't had a chance to kind of correct things. So things look a little yellow to me. I don't know why, but hey, you know what? We're just gonna go for it. So once again, my name is DJ Eshelman, and I am not a expert. I am just a guy with a psychology degree that is fascinated by this stuff, but also cares a lot about the people that are afflicted by mental illness. And so the intention with these broadcasts is to raise awareness, but also to talk about these things from a practical standpoint and give you uh, things to think about when you're encountering people like this, or if you have things like this in your life. So we've started with the first of these streams. It was about depression. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today in the context. And then yesterday I talked about anxiety, and actually I wanted to bring up something too, in the hopes that this will help someone. I was at a it's a group of men that meet on occasion here in Franklin, Tennessee, where I am located. And one of the things that we were talking about this morning is guilt and shame. And so I think these kind of feed into the topic. So I'm going to start today by talking a little bit about guilt and shame, and we'll just go from there and get into it later on. So the one thing is um, guilt is I've done something wrong. Right? That's the general feeling, the notion of what guilt is the sense that I've done something wrong. The second thing is shame, and that's that there's something wrong with me. Do you catch the difference there? It's one is based on a single action, and shame is based on a something about you personally. You can do nothing wrong and still feel shame, and so that's why it's important to be aware of these things. And I'm bringing this all up. Sometimes you feel this way, but you need to know that other people might be feeling this way too. And I'm going to give a couple of contexts here in a moment, but um, when you're feeling shame, the gist of it is that you feel you're not worthy of love, respect, or belonging. And that's at kind of that core, is that you don't feel you're worthy of it. And so you can, you know, shame yourself. You can have shame heaped upon you, like externally. It's something and I'm looking at notes on my phone, by the way. I took notes this morning at my meeting. That's why I'm looking down, just to be clear about that. But but shame is a response to uh, your past or your present. It's a response kind of a thing. It's not necessarily that's based on any kind of reality, which is kind of a theme for this whole week. Yesterday we talked about fear, and I touched on shame a little bit on Tuesday, and we were talking about depression. So that's why I wanted to bring this up. But the other thing that really stood out to me this morning was that social shaming that we're seeing a lot of right now. I am very, very concerned about the method of shaming on social media and what that's doing to us as a society. And I'm not just talking about like cancel culture and things like that. I'm talking about the way we tend to think and approach people online, where our first response is to look for what they're doing wrong. Our first response is to look at what we can tear apart. And we may not think we're doing that, but when you really boil things down, there are people listening to me, possibly even right now, I don't know, that are waiting for me to say something that is going to offend them. Now, I'm an interesting person with that because I actually thrive on offending people, because I think that's how we grow, by challenging our norms a little bit. I don't want to be offensive, but I do want to offend. The truth offends, right? So there's that. But as a society, though, we are getting a lot more to that point of having shaming others be a big thing. Um, it's when there's things like sin, or things you do wrong, or like if you are like caught in adultery and things like that. That's nothing new. But we tend to be bringing up things like a single action can be treated as if it's something, a deficiency of the person, and that's a pretty big challenge for me. That's why I wanted to bring this up today, is that I don't like that. I want people to be, you know, free to make mistakes and grow. I don't want to define people by their mistakes. Sort of like I don't want to define people by any kind of uh, illness or anything they have going on. Same thing with their actions and things like that. We don't want to be the kind of people. I don't want us to be those kind of people, and I'm hoping I'm not alone by this. But that's just kind of my belief. But honestly, if we're focused on their deficiencies, it's really hard to build them up after that. If we're constantly looking at how much less they are, and they'll feel that way. So um, we talked a lot about shame by association, which I think is really good, and I want to get into that at some point, maybe a future broadcast. But there was something that I saw this morning that really wanted to have as a writer downer kind of moment. So if you have a pen and maybe I'll just write this down with you and I'll put it up on the screen here. And that is that. Uh, oh, sorry, pain that is not transformed will be transferred. So on the screen, I'll read it with you. Pain that is not transformed will be transferred. And so when it comes to dealing with shame, if you don't deal with that, the odds of you transferring that to someone else is very high. Same thing with a lot of other things. If you just feel guilt about something, or if you're just in a place where you just kind of become a mean person, for whatever reason, that pain can be transferred to someone else, which is not fair. That's not good. We don't want to. I don't want us to see us be these people. And so I wanted to speak out that quote this morning. I thought that was really, really good. That pain that is not transformed will be transferred. We just don't live in that kind of a bubble where we just have our own little pain and we just keep it to ourselves. That's a myth, right? That doesn't really jive with reality. And there's a lot more that we can talk about, like with forgiveness and things like that, as far as that goes. But that actually is not the topic that I had for today. I wanted to bring that up. That was a really good capstone to the discussion we had on Tuesday. Or I say we, it wasn't really that interactive. It's just me on the screen, but still, there's been other people that have contacted me and said, how this is resonating for their lives and things like that. So I wanted to address that because I think that's something a lot of us go through. But today, I'm taking a pause here. If you're here with me live today, feel free to say hi. Just put in the chat, and whichever method you're viewing from. I didn't get this on the LinkedIn today, I don't think, and I apologize for that. I just recently got approved for LinkedIn Live, so I just realized I didn't actually activate that part of the stream. But we've got 3 different Facebook streams, 2 different YouTube streams, and we're back on Twitch. Yes, I reset my password and all the keys. We're good. We're secure there, but we're back on all the platforms. By the way, if you have a Twitch account, you should absolutely reset your password and make sure you take steps to secure your account. As with anything, sometime soon I'll be talking more about that from a technical standpoint, but that's not really why we're here today. So wanted to talk through what is often called, back in the past, it was called being manic depressive. And it just so happens that, I had the song by Jimi Hendrix in my head. And then I was thinking about a cover that King's X did. And it just so happened that this morning I was in my car going and popped in the CD that appears on. And man, I had that just cranked up loud this morning. It was just such a great experience for me. But I was listening to the lyrics. I'm like, it really doesn't describe that disorder at all, which we now call bipolar. So it's kind of fun to have that in a way. But on the other hand, we want to address things for what they are, not what they kind of feel like, but would actually speak the truth in those kind of things. So in this case, bipolar disorder, which, like I said, used to be manic depression, is a condition that can do a lot of different things. In one hand, you can have just drastic mood swings with the way you feel, like emotionally high, low, that sort of thing. But it goes beyond that. For me, it's something that I've dealt with most of my life. It's in looking through family history and the people I've been exposed to over my lifetime. It's something that I see a lot of and have dealt with myself as far as that goes. And that's why there are different levels of this. And I don't want to get into the uber geeky psychology part about this because I'm not really qualified anymore. My degree was like 20 years ago. I think I was dealing with right when they transitioned from DSM-3 to DSM-4, I think was that time frame. And at that time, they were kind of nailing down, okay, different levels of bipolar and that sort of thing. And how can we um, define when it's just an episodic thing? How close are they to get the shifts together? How much is it a lifelong condition? That sort of thing. And it really kind of is running the gamut as far as that goes. So again, just to reiterate with depression, that can be a mood element to depression where it is very much a uh, yeah, just in a melancholy kind of mood or feeling anhedonic. I can speak today, but it also can mean, in my case especially, that you can be joyful and happy, but at the same time you just don't have a lot of energy, and just things are a challenge for you, and you're not experiencing the kind of things you have in the past, and so that can be a kind of a depressive state. On the other side of that is mania, that manic or sometimes it's called hypomania, depending on what you're experiencing exactly. But it's what I would call it is a non-euphoric high state. In other words, it's not like you're just floating and everything's great. It's more like, I need to do all the things right now. And so in my case, my history with this is that I'm aware of cycles, and um, this year has been a little unusual because I was fully expecting to come out of a depressed cycle and didn't. And that's where I've been. That's what kind of set some alarms off my head because I'm so used to it. Usually when I'm feeling a little down and low energy, I'm like, yeah, this is just a cycle. I'm just going to work my way through it. There'll be another, normalcy. And then if I could draw, I should probably draw this out on the screen as far as how this goes. But if you can picture depressed down here and then normal here, and then kind of a manic state here, that's what I tend to go through. And so I will cycle through these, and it varies, but I tend to cycle through these you know about every month and a half or so. 2 months is tends to be the cycle with that. And it really is about mental exercises to try and keep that from getting too much on the manic side and too far on the depressed side, and keep it in the middle as much as I can. Because the thing we haven't talked about is that manic response, that um, like I said, some people define it as euphoric. I actually disagree with that assessment most of the time. You can get really irritable when you're in a manic state. You can, for me, I don't sleep well. My mind is just going, 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 going. This will happen when you're depressed too. It can. That's kind of one of the traits, by the way, is why they're kind of a similar kind of thing. You can be just straight depressed and straight manic, or bipolar. It is a thing. But the it's the type of swings when you're in the manic swing. In cases like mine, sometimes it'll affect the decision making. One of the more common things that I've experienced and I've heard from a lot of people that are bipolar is that they're much more likely to purchase something that they later regret when they're in a manic state. And I know some of you viewing this are in that kind of marketing kind of standpoint. And so I'm just going to say this as carefully as I can, but still say it. And that is that be cautious of over emotional manipulation, because you can actually stimulate people to think they need to take action when they really shouldn't. That can happen, and so that's kind of the what irritates me sometimes is when you're kind of Yeah, you want to sell from the heart and that sort of thing. Yeah, I get that, but there are times when that button is pushed way too effectively, and for a manic person, they're much like a, they've already given you a credit card halfway through it, that sort of thing. It's not always good, but anyway, that's a thing. But I wanted to explain more about that too. So there's other things that I've experienced and seen as far as like I said, there's multiple levels. I just looked this up, and there's actually um, four different distinct types, with the fourth being kind of a generalized bipolar with a lot of different examples to it. And so let me put this up on the screen again. I'll just do that because you know what? Why not? It'll be fun. And if I can choose the right screen, hopefully I'm choosing the right screen. Otherwise, you'll be seeing just a desktop. Okay, we're good. So yeah, bipolar one is that you've had an episode that is followed by another episode, uh, and I haven't talked about the break from reality part of this. This is something that I've seen, um, and it's something that is more common in just straight manic patients. There's a line once again between that and schizophrenia, but that can happen. So, but it's not a there's lengths of time and things like that to say that this is a straight disorder. And bipolar 2 is it kind of similar, but it's that you've never had a full-on manic episode. You might have, in if I were to diagnose myself, I would say I'm more likely to be bipolar 2, just because I just have these cycles, but I don't go, full on into a completely manic state where there's kind of a dissociation and kind of a break from um, full on reality. I guess you could say it's a harsh thing to say when you really uh, put it that way, but it's kind of true. Um, and yeah, the other hard to pronounce words and disorders and things, like I said, things have changed. Um, but there's the 2 year cycle thing with cyclothemic, oh gosh, where it's just a those cycles. But there's other things that you can be as well, um, and some are induced by other conditions. Like it's not just necessarily just a an imbalance thing. It's um, yeah, I'm explaining this poorly, and I actually need to get on with it here. So let me pause that for a second and get down to a couple of things I wanted to tell you about mania, and tell you a quick story about that. So um, there's a level of abnormality to being defined as having a manic episode, and usually it's a difference between a major and a minor in a lot of these kind of things. But again, it's levels of what's outside of your normal. Um, but a lot of things that I've seen with people that are diagnosed either manic or bipolar, um, you can have a dissociation with reality. And this can happen. This absolutely happens. I don't know what this is all about. But this is the like I said, one of the things that's most common that you see is some poor decision making. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is to say that a lot of times when you're working with someone that is bipolar, you'll see them make decisions that don't make any sense. And it's really important, if you're seeing these kind of signs, uh, to be sensitive to that sort of thing, and notice that um, there could be things in their life that are out of balance, and watch for a return. If it's something that's a pattern or something like that, it might be worth having the conversation with them about, look, I'm just concerned. Have you talked to anyone about this? This doesn't seem, like it's a good pattern for you. I've unfortunately had friends that um, went down a sexual path with this. Um, there's tragic stories out of that sort of thing where they just do things that are out of their normal pattern. And that's what mania can do, is it can get to the level where you aren't another person. Like, you don't have like a dissociative disorder, or what I used to call multiple personality. You're still you, and you're still very much aware, but you are now making choices and doing things that are way outside the norm that you're convinced are appropriate. Um, and so whether that's going out and buying a nice shiny blue BMW, just kidding, kidding, um, or things like that, foolish investments, that sort of thing can be part of that. But in some cases, it can go well beyond just any of that. So I used to work at a mental health institute when I was just finishing out my degree in Hastings, Nebraska, and one of the things that I worked on, I can't remember what they call it, like Ward 7 or something like that. It was like the high level ward where people were there always. They weren't getting off of that ward. That was where they lived from now on, that sort of thing. There were very serious cases, which is probably why I care so much about people addressing mental illness appropriately, is because I've seen, you know, how bad it can be. But there was an incident where I was called down to the lower floor, which is basically just like in a kind of a temporary care part of the facility. And they were dealing with someone who was manic, that they were having a hard time getting her sedated. They had to put a catheter in, all these kind of things, and they just could not get her to be unconscious long enough. She saw me, and actually there was a memory association or something like that kicked in, and for some reason she would listen to me. And I wasn't trained or anything like that. It wasn't like I was like manipulating it. It was one of those things where there was a temporary break with reality. And for some reason I was able to be the one to kind of at least calm her down. And then with treatment, she was able to come back to her normal sense of self and go on. And what had happened is she had stopped taking her medication. And so that's one of those things where that's something where um, knowing your limits is one thing, but sometimes your limits don't exist and you need medication. And so that's why a lot of people that I've known over the years have, you know, been balancing bipolar with medication quite well. And the medications have become much better. But it's really up to a professional to determine that. But the main thing that I wanted to get at here is that you can have people in your life that are suffering from these things. And a lot of times you may misinterpret that as, oh, they're being crazy or whatever. They're acting weird. Why are they acting weird? This is often this kind of happens sometimes with like somebody who's having a midlife crisis, for example. You can kind of throw some similar kind of things with a midlife crisis and acting kind of bipolar. Trust me, it is something that it might just be straight like part of a diagnosis at some point. I don't know, but I'm being someone who's currently experiencing that, who's 44 years old, and very much aware that I'm shifting things in my life. It's much more likely for me to take risks that I shouldn't, and then also have times of depression. I should also mention too that in not all cases is this true, but in most cases that I've ever heard of, I've rarely heard of a time where you've done things during a manic cycle that you regret that cause a depressive cycle. That usually doesn't happen that way. There might be a point of regret when you're in a depressed cycle later, but it usually it's not like an immediate trigger in most cases. In fact, in most cases I've ever experienced or talked to, there's not really like a moment. It's usually one of those things where you can kind of see a progression up and down. And this is something that I've learned to identify in my life, and why I've learned to kind of even communicate with my wife that, look, I feel like I'm cycling up or cycling down. Here's what to expect. And, I'm working on it, that sort of thing. And so I'm aware of that, speaking truth into that, and, getting past that, because that's, fortunately, I've been able to keep that under that level of control. But a lot of times people in that kind of situation may not be fully able to do that, and so that's something to be aware of. Um, and what I want to do is, this is probably going to kill my stream, but I figured, why not, for the last few minutes of this, I'll attempt to put on a little bit of King's X for you, and like I said, it'll probably be something I have to trim from whatever platforms. But if you have any questions about um, bipolar disorder or whatever, it is just resources for you out there online. Let me put this up on the screen again. The Mental Illness Awareness Week. This is going on for the next 2 days, basically, and so you can get those resources there.